Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
Hey, Dad, welcome to today's show, the Father on Purpose podcast. And before we go too far in, I want to remind you that we have a free resource for you as a dad. It's called the Mountain Monday newsletter. You can get encouragement every Monday morning. And who doesn't need encouragement on a Monday? So sign up for free today at manhoodjourney.org, manhoodjourney.org. Dive on in. It's totally free. Today, Lawson and I are going to give you the gift we occasionally give you, and that is we have a special guest with us. And I've only known this guest about a year. He's been a blast to get to know over the phone and through texts and so forth. But Lawson has known him quite a bit longer. So I'm just going to turn everything off, and I'm going to eat and drink and just laugh at you people while Lawson and Jay have a conversation. But before we get too far, I'd like to just welcome our special guest today, Jay Strickland. Jay, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I really appreciate y'all having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Lawson, let's grill him. Let's go. Start grilling him.
Yeah, I've got my list here. This is cool, Jay. You and me have been in all kinds of different places out there doing business together, and inevitably we have some sidebar conversation about dadhood or something to do with our faith. And then the podcast is, recently in the last, year or so become something that you and I kick around. And then here we are actually together on the podcast. Finally, I got you.
Yep. I can run, but I can't hide now.
He can run, but you can't hide.
That's right. And it's what's super cool. And Kent, you and me have talked about this, is kind of without me trying to do some internal to our industry and, kind of business cohorts promotion of Father on Purpose podcast, word has spread. And I've had some cool conversations with other dudes, that I get to work with within the industry, just like coming up and saying, "Hey, I heard something about your podcast, man. I've been," and it's just these kind of faith conversations, but also just a relationship on a deeper level that we've been able to have. And Jay, I think you've been a proponent of that.
Well, Lawson, if it's happening organically, why aren't you trying harder? Why don't you
I don't need to. I think God's got it.
Why don't you be more proactive?
That's the point.
Whatever. Let's get on to something really important. And that is, Jay, tell us a little bit about yourself. Get the guy oriented. We were talking to a dad more than likely, or a sneak in wife who's trying to help her dad. We do have some of those. We know you're out there, ladies. But talk to the dad and just tell him a little bit about you. Give us life status, how long you've been married. Do you have any kids or grandkids? Get us a little bit oriented to who is Jay Strickland.
All right. Well, that's a long story, but I'll make it short. I've been married 36 good years. Actually, I've been married 37, but the first year was terrible. So we just try to forget about that one. So, and I tell everybody, my wife gets kind of upset with me when I tell them that my first wife really messed my kids up. She was my first wife and last wife. So we have a lot of fun. We have 3 children, all adult children. They work in the family business with me, and we're in sprinkler fire protection. So we also have 9 grandchildren. They all live on the same farm. I have a little small farm outside of Washington, D.C. We have lemurs, zebras. I got a Zorse, half zebra and half horse. I tell people we just have a lot of fun.
Wow.
You do have a lot of fun. This guy's family. Describe the farm a little bit, Jay, but also, and I want to get to it where, what we've talked about before, you and me, and then on the podcast too, is there are stages of fatherhood. Specifically in your case, I'm thinking about your dad, Manning, and how his father and his father's father led him to where he was when he began the company. I do want to get onto that, but before that, talk about your relationship with your dad that is you work together, you have lived on the same property together, they have lived in the same home together with you guys. I mean, super close family. And then you have now replicated that relationship with your own children. Talk about how that has just always been a part of your life, or have you really worked on, fostering that?
Well, again, like you said, some of this happens organically, and but as we know, most of it is all in the Lord's hands. Sometimes when you try to make something happen, it doesn't work very well. When I was young, 6 years old, my mom passed away, and my dad had me and my sister. She was 3 years old. And so me and my dad were real close. He remarried about 3 years later. And as time grew on, I got married. And I always had a vision to have a small farm so I can share with people. I love doing, different ministry type work and things like that. So in the meanwhile, my dad started a business, sprinkler, fire protection. And he told me, son, he said, you only have to work a half a day. I don't care which 12 hours you work. And he meant it.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
So we started in a family business. And a lot of times people look at those type of things as it can either be a blessing or a curse. You turn it over to the Lord, it can be a blessing. And my dad was always a guy that he always believed in giving back. His philosophy in business is to give the customer more than they expect. And he was always good at that. He retired about 8 to 10 years ago, and I was able to purchase the business from him, the remaining portion. And from there, each one of my children got married. And it's just amazing how the Lord just kind of opened those doors and opportunities. With the small farm, we had a house on there, which my in-laws moved into. And I told them it was theirs as long as they were living. And they passed away about 8 years ago. And so my first son, when he got married, he was able to move into their house. And it's just amazing how the Lord just kind of opened that door at the right time. And, him and his wife, they started their family. They have 3 children. And then about a year later, my other son, Micah, he got married. He actually ended up marrying Josh's wife's best friend, which they were roommates in college. So it always helps when you add another lady to the family that they're already friends.
Yeah.
So,
oh, that's great.
And then, so they have 4 boys under the age of 5.
Oh.
So you tell me that's not a crazy house?
Wow.
And it's all boys. I mean, they're outside playing all the time, just crazy. Then my daughter got married a couple years later, and it just so happened the house that was right on the corner of the farm, we were able to purchase. And but she wasn't ready to move in kind of like on the family compound yet. She wanted to do her own thing. And her problem is she's a lot like her father. So kind of doing her own thing all the time. But once she saw us fixing the house up and getting it ready, and once reality hit, what she wanted and could afford are 2 different things. That's amazing how those things come together sometimes. So she came back to the farm, and her and her husband, they started her family. She just had her second child. So she has 1 boy and 1 girl. And so we have been blessed. And a lot of times people look at that and say, how in the world do y'all work together? You live on the same farm.
Yeah, right.
And we go to the same church. And you know what I tell people? We have all the same problems as every other family. But it's how you handle the problems is what makes the difference. And we've been blessed. I tell people I wasn't smart enough to go to school, and I know some people that aren't smart enough to get out of school. You ever notice that? But fortunately, we've been in a situation to where I look at myself as that 3-cent coffee filter. I'm sure you've heard me say that before, but I don't care how good a coffee you buy, but if you don't run it through that little 3-cent coffee filter, it tastes pretty nasty. So as I'm sure you can probably tell with this lighting, it kind of makes my hair look a little gray. I don't think it's as gray as it really looks, but you know what the Bible says, it's a sign of wisdom. So I'm going with that. So
The
ultimately,
Zoom camera, it adds 10 pounds too. That's at least what I say.
there you go. I tell people this is the only investment I have that's not losing. Um, so basically with the family, everybody living on the farm, like I tell people, we have good days, we have bad days. We have the same issues as every other family, but I always say tough meat tastes better after it marinates. So you can go back to your corner and let it marinate a little bit and come on back together.
Mm-hmm.
And so in time, we're able to work through those things. And we have good days, bad days, but at the end of the day, everybody knows we love each other and we're all there to take care of each other.
Jay, did you grow up? Thank you for telling the story, by the way, about your mom passing away. I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't know that about your background. It sounds like your dad went through what would have been a very difficult season as a dad. I'm curious, was faith or church or some kind of religious component, was that a part of your dad's life and you grew up in that? Or how did you come to find the Lord, or what was been your sort of faith journey like?
Well, fortunately, my dad did bring me up in the church. He didn't necessarily have that in his background. He came up through very tough times, a lot of issues and things in the family. Nowadays, they would probably consider that child abuse and neglect and everything else, but he was able to work through it. He lived in South Carolina. He came to Maryland in, I think it was 1962 or 63, and started out working as an apprentice in a sprinkler business and worked his way up to general manager of the company. And then from there, he raised my sister and myself. And when we didn't have things, it wasn't because, hey, one day we're going to have this and we're going to do better. This was just the best it was. And he loved us. And we didn't even know we didn't have anything. I tell people I grew up in, people see what we have now, but they don't see what it took you to get to that point.
Yeah.
And so just like with him, he was never somebody that, said, hey, one day we're going to have this. We were just living today, and enjoying it. I can remember going to school and kids were making fun of me. I guess I was so oblivious to it. I didn't even know they were making fun of me. We lived in a trailer park. I thought the trailer was the best thing you could possibly live in. And we were happy. And it's not saying that you had everything that you wanted, but I had everything that I needed. I never went hungry. I never went out without clothes or anything like that. Funny story is back in, I guess, when these designer jeans came out, we didn't have a lot of money, and my stepmom and my dad, they wanted to get me some clothes for school. It was getting ready to start back up. My aunt happened to work at a sewing room in South Carolina. She actually got me some designer jeans. And this was when I was in the 7th grade. So, 7th grade is pretty critical for a guy when he's going to school. So I get to school and some kids are making fun of me. And I'm looking at like, what's the big deal? I had brand new jeans on. I didn't understand. Guess what? They were girls' jeans.
Oh,
Everybody knew it except Goofy Jay, So that was a pretty stressful time in my life. So needless to say, I took those jeans off and I never put them back on. But it's just so funny how those things grow and give you character. We heard the saying before, what don't kills you makes you stronger. And, when we look back over our lives and I see the things from my mom passing away to the journey that we've taken on down the road, I have been so blessed to recognize these things that if you turn it over to the Lord, it becomes a blessing instead of a curse. And fortunately, I'm glad I'm not smart enough to where I have to have all the answers today, because I just never did. But when you look back, it's nice to see where you came from, but you have to keep looking forward so you can see where you're going, and with that, with my kids, I've always tried to instill in that, hey, all I care is that you do the best that you can possibly do. Just like working in the business, that was never a requirement. Sometimes there was a self, I guess, expectation that you put on yourself and other people. Each one of my kids, when they had the house on the farm, my oldest son, has one of the smallest houses. It's funny how other people try to look at them and say, how come he's got the smaller house and how come this one's got a bigger house? People don't like to see you happy and satisfied. Uh, I
Mm.
think that's just a human nature, but the Lord has instilled in each one of the kids that, hey, what I have is exactly what I need for now. And so we've been blessed with that.
Hey, Chris, today in the church, we seem to have this crisis of manhood where we're still wrestling with even, gosh, what's a man? What is he at all? What's he to do? How's he to behave? And so in that light, we're struggling, I think, in the church with discipling men. Why are we struggling with that? And what can we do about it?
Yeah, that's such a good question. We're struggling with discipling men largely because men think church is boring. They come to church and it's very feminized, right? From the colors to singing about drowning in an ocean of God's love. Like they're just not interested in that. But that's just the way it is because that's the base of the church today, and a lot of churches cater to their base. So we're losing men from the very beginning. They're already bored with church. They're not enamored with Jesus, right? They want a king, they want a captain, like they want someone to lead them into battle, and they're not seeing that. So where we're seeing progress is when we drill down and we kind of go to that micro level and we look at discipling men, that 2 to 3 on one discipleship process where we're really showing men who Jesus is, like the authentic Jesus, not white, long-haired, in a dress, driving a Prius hippie Jesus, like not him, and nothing wrong with driving a Prius. I mean, gas prices are ridiculous. I get it. But like the Jesus of Scripture that commands respect and authority and affection and things of that nature. So we show them the true Jesus and then who they are in this Jesus. I mean, they're kings, bro, like kings in training. And we create just a greater affection and following for Jesus in men.
Better Man is one of our ministry partners. We love what Chris and his team there are doing. If you or your church is looking for a group study for your men to go through that covers the essentials of biblical manhood and helps men have a clear vision of how they can be as a man, they can gain confidence, become the man they want to be, improve relationships, and create a more purposeful life, check out the resources from our friends Better Man. You can find those at betterman.com.
Hey, when you're interacting with people on your team, other dads that over time you've gotten to know better, they work at Strickland Fire, and you get a new person on the team, or maybe down the road something comes up. How do you approach bringing godly fatherhood into the conversation with people that are working at Strickland Fire without, everybody knows you guys are kind of faith-based. It's pretty open, but there's got to be times where you've thought, you want to invest in somebody on your team. What have you done to get better at that? You're a mentor to a lot of people, but specifically people who work at Strickland Fire. Over time, I'm sure you've had opportunity to invest in them as a father figure, I guess.
Well, I think the most part is recognize that you don't have all the answers. And so many times people come to you and will ask you a question similar to that. And when I look at what I've done in my life, it's easier for me to share with you what I've done wrong. And you can learn by my mistakes, so you don't have to make them all yourself. So when we are sharing with people, I see somebody that is struggling with something, and it's tough when you're technically in charge, and maybe you have co-worker coming to you and asking you those questions.
Yeah, you're not technically in charge. It's your company, your name on the door, and they're
right.
Probably intimidated maybe to bring something up to you and be real and be authentic.
I'm intimidated on this phone call, and I don't even work for Jay.
How do you breach? How do you jump that gap when you're the boss, you're the owner, you both are getting through life together, and they're coming to you or you see an opportunity to help.
Yeah. I think what you have to do is just share your heart. People can see if you're real or if you're not. And I try real hard to be the same person, because I'm not smart enough to figure out who I am today versus who I was yesterday. So I just try to be that same person all the time. And with people that you love and you care about, even in our company. And I share with people all the time and tell them that, hey, we're a small family owned business. But you know what? I look at everybody that works for me and with me as part of the family. And sometimes you get that across to people, but you know, in this day and age, people are a lot more standoffish, you know, kind of like, hey, is this guy real or not?
Mm-hmm.
And so in my heart, what I really try to do is pray for these guys when I see that they have some issues or see something that's going on, without being over religious on sometimes. I think you got to be careful sometimes because that comes across as fake, you
Mm.
know, hey, brother, I'll pray for you. But does that person really believe or are they
Right.
really going to pray for me? Um,
Right.
and so I try to do it right there, you know, and in a small way is, and not too long ago, I had somebody come to me. Um, as you know, on Lawson, you know, a fat boy like me, I like to eat. You know, I tell people I got a lot invested in this body, and so I keep it that way. So, you know, I go to lunch or go to dinner with clients or friends, and I'll ask them, "Is it okay if I pray?" And you know what? Out of all the times I've done it, I've never had a single person tell me no. And then it just gives you an opportunity to pray for those people that are with you that day. And I think that will open the door many times for people to come back later. Just recently, I was in California and I had done that. And the person after the dinner later that evening came up to me and said, "You know, I really appreciate you doing that." And I said, "What?" They said, "You praying at dinner." You know, it's not even something that you think about because you do it all the time. So that would be one thing I would let people know is those little things that you do mean a whole lot to the person that needs it, you know. And if you
Yeah.
think about it, you can take your cell phone, you turn it on in a bright room, that little bit of light doesn't light up the room at all. You turn those lights off and you turn that cell phone on, it lights up the whole room. You've ever been in a movie theater?
Yeah.
You know,
Right. Right. Yeah. You
and
see it
so
from
that
far off.
so that's what I would like to say to encourage people. That little bit that you know and that you do will mean so much more to those that are around you.
And
Mm.
what about for dads who are in a similar kind of stage of life where they have children who have children? Um, I heard somebody the other day say unsolicited advice can be taken as criticism. And so if you see something, you know, where one of your sons, for instance, any of your kids, but you know, as a fatherhood show focusing on your boys, how do you navigate when to jump in to their life, when to let them be their own dad, learn their own way, that sort of thing? What are your thoughts?
Well, as I said earlier, um, it is so important to start as early as you possibly can. I don't care how small that little one is. Um, they're watching you. They're learning from you. You know, you ever notice we don't have to teach a kid to do wrong. We automatically do it, you know? And so I think if you start early, you learn those habits, you learn those things better. But as I mentioned earlier, I didn't always do all those things right. And so I look back, I could have been so much more of a father than, or better father than I was. And so I can't go back and change any of those things. So now I can be that father that God's called me to be today. And how do I do that? Is by being there when somebody needs me. Um, and that's easy to say when you're talking on a podcast. It's another thing when
Yeah.
in the heat of the
Tell me
moment,
about it. Yeah.
in the heat of the moment when things are going crazy, sometimes me and my wife will be having, I call it a discussion, you know, and so she says, "Why are you getting so loud?" I said, "I don't know." But you know how it is. You know, we have a tendency of raising our voice to get our point across. And so I think that's what we have to be able to is to laugh at ourselves and recognize I don't have all the answers. And it's
Mm.
okay to be real and say, you know what? I don't know. But if you don't know who to ask. I said it earlier. that the friends you keep determines the trouble you meet. And that is so true. But it can be on a positive side also.
Mm.
The friends you keep can help you from getting in that trouble. And so I think if we, surround ourselves with people that are like-minded, that I, I used to teach the youth a lot over the years, about 18 years at our church, and went on many different, mission trips and things with them. And, you know, a lot of the kids, when they're 17, 18 years old, well, why can't I go to this party? Why can't I do this? I'm going to go there and I'm going to be an example to help these other kids. And that's always a good excuse. And it's a great thing if it's truth. But what I say, if you see a drowning person in a pool, it's a lot easier for that drowning person to pull you into that pool than for you to pull that person out of the pool.
Mm.
So, what do you do? The best thing to do is have the training and be able to hand them something that will help them. What is a lifeguard going to do? He's going to hand you a pole. He's going to hand you a life raft to pull you out. And I think that's what we got to be careful of, is just don't jump all in at one time. We got to prepare ourselves and be ready for it.
Could you elaborate on something, Jay? This idea of raising your voice to get your point across. I don't understand what you mean. I've never had that problem. So I'm just saying that for my wife's benefit, who I know listens to this podcast, because I've done that 10,000 times and it doesn't seem to get my point across. But I still do it like an idiot. I want to ask you a question. I know you'd be more than happy to talk about the things that you did wrong, and we'll talk about some of those if you like. Where'd you make some mistakes as a dad? But I just got to ask, you've painted a picture of a family that I know is imperfect. I'm not trying to hold the Strickland family up as some, golden image on the top of the mountain. However, you do have kids who like to be in the business and kids who hang out with each other and kids who are, willing to be around you. And so there's at least some version in your family of some degree of familial connectedness. And, you guys have this thing that a lot of the guys listening to this podcast who have 4-year-old and 8-year-old and 12-year-old kids, they're thinking, man, I'd love to have something like Jay has when my kids are 20 and 25 and 30. And I know it's imperfect. Again, I'm not overselling it, but what I'm wondering is, what were some things you did along the way that might have contributed to that outcome? What were, I'm asking you to not over pat yourself on the back, but I'm sure you made some good choices along the way, or you could just talk about the good choices your wife made, but there's got to be some things you guys did.
She chose me.
At least serendipitous, or they were intentional, where you look back now and you go, yeah, when we did that one thing, or we did that thing, or we have a pattern of X that helped to create, because I know a lot of guys who would love to have a family outcome kind of like the Strickland family. Again, not overselling it, but what were some things that you did along the way that you think may have contributed to a family that has some degree of, unity and congeniality?
Well, it started early. You got to make sacrifices. I don't always get what I want. I got to do what's best for everybody. And that sounds easy, and you do. But every day we make sacrifices. We're sacrificing something for something else. And I can remember early on, my wife says subliminally, like, how come you aren't like such and such? But you ever notice the same things you like about people or the same things you don't like about them? When they're doing it for you, you like it. When they're doing it to you, you don't like it. And so early on in the business, told you that I worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Very seldom did we ever work on Sunday, but it wasn't whether you wanted to work over or on a Saturday. That was just what we did. And so those sacrifices that I made in those early days got us to where we are today. And yes, I could have been home more. I didn't go to every one of my kids' games and all these things that people are able to do. And those are some sacrifices I made. But because of those sacrifices, I'm able to help them out a whole lot more today. And do you think any of those games that they will remember? Most of the time, they didn't even want to be in the game. They're out there picking the dandelions out in the field. And, I went to some games, but for the most part, my wife took care of those things. And those were some tough times. And I don't mean financially or anything like that. I mean more so we have expectations that we put on people. Sometimes it's unrealistic. Whether it's a spouse wanting you to be there because the other spouses are there, or how come you work all the time? Now, there's some choices that we make. There's certain places and certain times we need to be at those places. There's certain times to be at work. There's certain times to be at home. There's certain times to be at church. And the Bible talks about those things. There's a time for everything. And so in that season of my life, I had to make some decisions. I love my wife more than anything in the world. She's my best friend. But there was times that she wanted certain things that I wasn't able to give her. And so I had to make that tough decision and say, darling, I'm sorry, but we can't do that right now. And she wasn't very happy with that. And I wasn't happy with myself because I had to tell her that, because deep down, I am a people pleaser. I love for people to be happy and have a good time. And so, but as time went on, when we look back, what she has today was 10 times better than the thing that she was wanting back then. So sometimes we have to wait, and it's not fun waiting. I don't care who it is. Nobody likes to wait in line. Nobody likes to wait in traffic. But when we look back, and because we did wait our turn, when our turn came, we were ready to accept what we had. And my early days, I wasn't as patient. I wasn't as calm as I am now. They say a good wine mellows with time. So I must be a real good wine right now. I'm not sure. But ultimately, the Lord has kind of brought us to this place in our life. And is it perfect? No. But because we waited for the things and the times when we could do it, because just giving somebody more and more and more, that doesn't make things better. And I think that's what kind of helped me get to where I am and the family.
When you were doing the youth group, were your kids right there with you? Did you take them on mission trips? And then when you were together in that sort of atmosphere or environment, rather, what did you do specific to them? Did you treat them, your expectations a little more on them, or was it like you included them and they helped put things together? How did you include them in your life on that?
Well, I think I was a perfect father. But if you ask my kids, they may tell you a different story. It is funny how we remember certain things. We have one way of remembering things, and then the person that was with you, they have another way, and you wonder if you actually saw the same movie or not.
Right.
And so, but with that, with each one of my kids came up through the youth group, and my wife and I both taught each one of them coming up. And so we were able to spend time. You try to give them enough room. I kind of look at it almost, we have some baby chicks on the farm. And if you ever see a baby chick, you got to hold it tight enough so it doesn't jump out of your hands, but not so tight you smother it. And that is not an easy place to be, because depending on how each one of those chicks have a different activity level, just like each one of my kids, they had a different activity level. I had a couple that was very compliant, and I had one that was like their father and wasn't as compliant, and everything that they saw the gray areas, and tried to skirt the edges as much as you can. And so as a father, it's a tough place to be sometimes. And just like when we look back at our lives, you can always look at somebody else's family and say, man, why can't we be like that? Well, you know why? Because God made you exactly the way you are and put you in the place that you need to be right here. And God doesn't make any mistakes. And that's what I had to start looking at myself, because I knew I wasn't the smartest guy around. I knew I wasn't college material when it was time to go to college, but I could work hard. Um, so that's what I did. And we worked hard and got to the place where we are. And and if you learn by your mistakes, you know, you do grow and and you start recognizing, you know what? I didn't really like the way that worked out. So let's try something a little bit different. We don't want to keep doing the same thing and ended up with the same results. We know that's, you know, the definition of insanity. And so every one of us has been dealt a different deck of cards, you know, different hand, and it's how you play that hand. You know, you hear people talk about every hand can be a winner. You know, and so how you play those cards will make a difference. You know, and if we place our hope and our trust in the Lord, it is going to work out because He has a perfect plan for our lives. And no matter how hard we try to mess it up, all we got to do is turn it back over to him. You know what he does? He shuffles them back up and hands you another deck of cards, another hand of cards, and say, "Here you go. Let's try this one."
Mm.
He is a God of grace, a loving God, and you know, if we read our Bible, obey what we read, God will never let you down. That sounds so simple, and it is. If I could just remember that every day.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Hey, talking about hard times, what were you too young when your mom died to remember a whole lot? Do you remember what your dad did differently after that?
I have a few memories of my mom. It's amazing. I was 6 years old going into the first grade. And I can remember my dad had two jobs at that time. And we were fortunate. We lived in a trailer park. And my aunt, which was my mom's sister, came from South Carolina. And now my mom's not only her sister, but it was her identical twin sister.
Oh,
Now that
wow.
tell me that's
Yeah.
in unique. Um, so so basically, she brought her family up, and for about 2 years, we lived with them, my sister and I, because my dad had to work during the daytime. Um, so we would stay with them, and then we would come home on the weekends. In the summertime, I would go to South Carolina and spend the whole summer with my grandparents. I thought it was because I liked staying with them, but they actually was trying to get rid of me because my dad had to work. Um,
Right.
so we with that, I think I could
Do you,
just see. Go ahead.
do you remember what Manning did, um, like before and after? For
Okay.
a dad out there that might be in the middle of something like that,
Hmm.
you never know who's listening.
Right.
Do you remember something as a kid that impacted you that your father was able to take on extra, or because I see him now, he's this legendary kind of figure that roves around the industry and everybody loves him and he's happy go lucky. But man, that's a lot to have two young kids like that and lose your partner. What did he do as a dad that sticks out to you back then?
Well, I do remember at the funeral, that was the first time I ever saw my dad cry. Now,
Mm,
it's funny, as a 6-year-old, you still remember that. But the one thing I recognize that he never did, he never tried to give me something he couldn't afford. Um, you know, and whether, but I never, you know how you see people, they want to give their kids more and more, and they put themselves in debt,
right.
and then that's a struggle, and then all that does is add more pressure to the
Mm,
family, more
yeah.
more pressure to the dad to feel like, hey, I got to do more, I got to do this. But ultimately, as a kid, all I wanted was my dad. You didn't care about all these other things. And so what's the most valuable thing that we all have is time. And I think that's what we have to be careful of and recognize. It's not about the things, it's about the time that we spend with our families, with our kids. And it's and you hear about quality time. It's not just about spending the time, but it's what you're working on at that time. You know, am I
Mm,
mentally with them? Am I thinking about all the other things I need to be doing?
Yeah.
What I try to do now on the farm, I have a couple grandchildren that's 6 and 7, and they love helping me on the farm. I love for them to help me, but there's time that I don't have a lot of time, and I'm trying to get something done. And but you know what I think about? If I don't show them now, when they get older, they're not going to want to be with grandpa.
Right.
Yeah.
They're not going to want to be with me, helping me do these things. So I got to invest that time into them now. So for a dad out there that's going through some tough situations, I don't care if you can't do it. You may not be connected as a family. Write them a letter.
Mm.
Just give them something to let them know that you love them and care about them.
Yeah.
Every one of us has the same wants, needs, and desires, but it's how we fulfill those things. And
Mm.
I don't think anybody can ever look back when you apologize to somebody. I heard somebody talking about the other day. They said they were going to have a fight with their wife. So you know what they did? They put two chairs about 20 inches apart and held hands. Now it's real hard to fight with somebody when you're holding their hands, isn't it?
I
But
like
that's what
that.
we need. That's what we need to do with our kids. That's what we need to do with
Mm.
our loved ones. Um, and and use our words. Words are like toothpaste. A lot of times we get upset and angry. What do we to say? We say something that we wish we could take back. Once you squeeze that toothpaste out, you can't get it back in that
Right.
tube. So we just have to be careful, hold our tongue. And I get accused of this sometimes. My wife will tell me, "You're a lot more patient with those people that you work with than you are with me." And
I've,
you know what?
Ouch. Ouch.
That hurts. That
yeah.
hurts,
Yeah.
And I like to say, "You're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about." But ultimately, when I stop and do some self-examination, um, she's right. And that's why,
Mm.
really speaks to me.
You
Yeah.
said something a minute ago, Jay, and I back channel, I texted this to Lawson. Uh, you said something. I don't even know if you noticed that you said it, but I want to come back to this statement. You seem to have either developed or you've always been this way, kind of a spirit of contentment. And what the way it came across a minute ago was you were talking about your time as a young child, and you said we were fortunate. We lived in a trailer park, and then you just went on and told the rest of the story. What's funny is a lot of people would actually not put "we were fortunate" in the front half of that sentence. They would put, "Oh, we were destitute, we were broke down, we didn't have nothing," we lived in a trailer. And I just find it interesting. You seem to have a high degree of contentment. Is that true? Am I reading you right? And secondly, has that always been kind of a strength of yours, or have you had to develop that in your adulthood?
I probably developed it. I think it's just like probably asking Tiger Woods, how did he develop that swing? One swing at a time, and he had to
Mm.
keep working on it. I think it was probably a given ability, but it's kind of like a gold miner. You got to move a lot of dirt to get to that gold, and so that's what we have to do. We got to get rid of the junk, but if we get rid of that, then we can get to the real nuggets. And I prayed for many years that God would give me grace, but most of all that He would give me wisdom and
Mm.
the ability to apply that wisdom. And it has amazed me with the opportunities that He's given me through that. Um, and yeah, I try to, it's hard for me to sit here and talk about all the things I do good because I know all the issues that I have. But when you start, it's like an onion. You start unpeeling it. There's another layer right there, and once we take a look at that and we see, hey, you know, if I'm patient, how much easier things go. You know, if I want to fly off the handle and get upset, how bad things go. So which way do I want it to go? I want it. Do I want it the easy way or do I want it the hard way? Uh, and when you know something that is going to tick you off and make you blow your top, take a step back, and say, okay, how do I want? Every good athlete, every professional, what do they have to do? They got to train. They do it over and over again. And they say practice makes perfect, but also heard that perfect practice makes perfect. None of us are perfect. None of us are going to be able to do it perfectly, but the pattern of your life will determine the direction that you will go.
Hey, you don't know this, but I've seen Jay in some like people wearing suits at the dinner, at a conference kind of thing, and the next thing you know, you hear a crowd of people laughing. I look over, and there's Jay Strickland standing over somebody's table doing magic tricks, or just doing a little like impromptu stand up, going literally table to table. Jay, how do you, is that something that you, like, your dad is also funny. I think I've been around your family enough to know everybody laughs a lot. How has that gotten you through sometimes, and how has that helped you share your faith with others?
I think one of the biggest things is, if you're not happy and satisfied with yourself, nothing or anything else is going to make you happy or satisfied. And there was a long time, nobody likes to be laughed at. Nobody likes to be that kid that's not real smart. I was always those things. But then once I was able to embrace it, I was able to enjoy it. And then I can share that with other people. And so people enjoy having a good time a lot more. And so in the year 2000, I went to Brazil on my first mission trip. And when I went to Brazil, I could work hard. I wasn't a Bible scholar or any of these things. I went to church. Went to Sunday school, and I knew the Lord as my Savior. But I was not somebody that just openly just shared my faith,
Right.
But I enjoyed working hard, and so that's what we did. Every day they would take a group out into the community. A lot of people had a lot of gifts and abilities. Some people could sing, some people could play the guitar. I couldn't even play the radio. So basically they said, Jay,
oh my gosh,
you're doing you're doing real good. Keep working. And I said, okay. So we would work, and then Thursday came, and we were supposed to leave on Friday, and they said, tomorrow, we really need you to stay back and help, because the project needs to be completed. And could you please do that? I actually wiped the sweat from my forehead because I was glad I didn't have to go out into the community and talk to these people, because I was scared to death to do it. I enjoyed what I was doing. So, but that night we had a pastor, and he preached a sermon, and he said, I'm going to lead you in a prayer. He said, but don't pray this prayer unless you really mean it. And I'm thinking, he said, and I was serious about this. And he prayed that, God would break you of your pride and arrogance. And, I was so proud and arrogant, I didn't even know I was. And I prayed that prayer, and I said, hey, how bad can it be? But you know what? For the next year, the Lord started showing me things in my life that I needed to change, and, and struggles and issues and different things that I had to keep, peeling away. And when I came home from that trip, when I talked to my wife, she recognized that. She said, something's different. When I told her about that story, when I told her about what the Lord was leading me to do. Now, as I told you, I wasn't the smartest guy in the world, but I learned that it's a lot easier to go out into the community and the schools than carry blocks up 2 stories on this camp project that we were working on. So what did I do? I learned how to do some magic tricks. My wife came in, and this is that long ago. They had a VCR a little at the table, and I was watching a video how to make balloon animals and how to do magic tricks. So I started doing that. And as you can probably tell with this conversation, I'm not the best speaker in the world, but I enjoy having a good time. So what I did is I learned how to do this, and I started sharing on my next trip. Instead of sweating all day, I was able to go into the school and play with the kids, make balloon animals, do magic tricks. And Now my wife tells me, she said, you need some new tricks. I said, no, I just need a new audience, you know? So you have to be able to enjoy what you have instead of look at what you don't have, because I don't care where you look, there's always going to be somebody that is more talented, that is smarter, that has more than you do. But at the end of the day, what are you doing with what you've been given already? And the Bible talks about that with the talents.
Mm.
Am I hiding my talents? Am I just planting them here? But just the little small things that I can do. How easy is it to have a good time and make somebody laugh and be able to open that door, that somebody can share with you maybe an issue that they're going to. There, people write books about the Bible, what I don't know, but I'm not responsible for that. All I'm
Mm.
responsible is what I do know.
I love
Hmm.
that.
Jay, I want to ask you in a second. I want to ask you a question. We hear from dads a lot who give us feedback in terms of emails and surveys, and a lot of them feel like they are failing. They feel like they're not doing a good enough job as a dad. And so I want to give you a second to kind of process. Maybe as a last question, what would you say to that dad who feels like he's failing? Before you answer that, let that roll around in your head for a second. I want to share. I was working in our bathroom this weekend, and I played a lot of the music from one of my favorite bands, and that's Need to Breathe. And I love that band, and I have heard, I think, every song they've ever recorded more than once.
That's kind of ironic, in the bathroom, I need to breathe.
Well, and even further ironic is I was working with bleach, and I really should probably not have been working with bleach, because I really did need to breathe fresh air. And they're a really I think they're very lyrical. I love their lyrics. And I had heard this song, I don't know, dozens and dozens of times. But recently I had a thing happen in our ministry where I saw someone else in another role like mine kind of get a good opportunity, get ahead, and I was a little envious. I was a little jealous. And I remember hearing this song this past weekend. And in the song, I'll butcher the lyrics. I don't have it exactly, but in one of their songs, they say, he says in his 20s, he watched his friends take over the radio. So he watched all the other bands get a lot of airtime. And then the next line was, and all it did was drill a hole in my ego. Oh, and I just remember hearing that line, and I thought, whoo, that is a good line. And when you talk about contentment, I wouldn't say I am generally a discontent person. I'm fairly content, but I do occasionally wrestle with envy, occasionally wrestle with discontentment in that way, where I want things to happen faster, and I'm sometimes not happy if they're happening faster for other people. So you made me think of that. I wanted to share it. Shout out to one of my favorite bands. But back to that question that dads tell us often, Jay, they feel like they're failing. They don't feel like they're doing enough. They're either not allocating their time correctly, their money correctly. They're not a good enough husband. They're not a good enough dad. Their past sin, somehow gets in their way of feeling like they can disciple their children. What would you say if you're sitting across a cup of coffee with a dad who just said, Jay, I just feel like I'm failing as a dad? How do we encourage that dad as we wrap up today's show?
I think when you think about it along the same lines you were just talking about, many times it's more fun wanting something than actually getting it. And I think we have to really evaluate, why do I want this? Because now if I get it, I got to do something to take care of it. And the things that we're striving for as dads, if we truly want our kids to love us, to care about us, I got to spend that time with them. Now, that time doesn't always mean that I'm going to be right there with them. I got to go to work so I can have that time, so I can pay for the things that need to be paid for, the essentials. But, for a dad that feels like he's not perfect, welcome to the club. We're all like that. And I think you have to take it back a little bit and evaluate, what do I really want to see? And, and not getting over religious here, but if I read God's word and I look at the examples, I love Proverbs. As I told you, I prayed for wisdom. And, you read one of those Proverbs every day. In a month, you can read the whole book, 31 Proverbs. And you read it over and over. Maybe I'm just a little bit slow, but the more I read it, He opens that door and lets me see things that
Mhm.
that I never saw before. And you can buy the best paint in the world, but if you don't take it out of that paint can and apply it, what good is it? Now, if I take that paint, that same $100 gallon of paint, and I give it to Leonardo da Vinci and let him put it on that wall, how much more is that paint worth? And so the Lord's given us gifts and abilities. Am I going to apply what he has given me? And so I got to start with the little and let it grow. And you will be amazed what the Lord can do with just that little bit of light if you let it shine.
Wow.
Love it, dude. Man, it's been a real treat. I get to talk to you often, Jay, and being together when we're out doing our work is I told you before, getting into this industry, I've fallen in love with it, but it's people like you that have invested in me, and it's more than a work relationship. I really value your friendship. You've embraced me as part of the family there, and so it means a lot to have you on the show. And I pray that there's a dad or two out there that has heard something that you've said that really resonated with them. And I'm thankful that whenever we're together, I can feel that God is here with us, and he's guiding and instructing. So thanks for being here with us today, Jay. It means a lot.
I'm very humbled and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful, remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call the person up and tell them to listen in. Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week.